sharing with you in this video 5 ways to connect with your higher self to create your goals faster. I really believe that this is an extremely powerful concept because what can happen is that if we can begin to connect more with who we actually are at a much deeper level, at the existential level, in terms of who we really are at essence and in terms of the nature of who we really are, what begins to happen is that we begin to have more clarity on how to achieve what we want faster. And so the first thing that I want to share with you in this video in terms of how to do this, the first way to connect with your higher self to create your goals faster is really to understand that the first thing you really want to do is to take the burden off your ego. Just take the burden off your ego. Like, your ego doesn't have to figure it all out. So when the ego takes all the burden and all the responsibility, you're thinking from a very limited perspective. You don't have a wide horizon. You can't think in the bigger picture. You can't think in the long term. None of these things are clear to the ego because the ego is just, remember, based on survival. Don't get me wrong, survival is important, but you don't want survival to just be the primary indicators of the way that you're setting up your life. I believe that the beauty of being human and what makes us human and what makes us more intelligent and more capable and have more capacity than other species on this planet is to have that awareness to think greater than just our instincts and our instincts alone. So if you want to bring it back to creating your goals, the solution here is to not, again, put all the burden on your limited ego mind. Just your limited ego mind. So that's just the first thing I want to get out of the way here before I go deeper into the video or go into any of the points in terms of the second to the fifth points in this video, is really just to understand that you don't need to put all the responsibility on your limited, tiny little ego. Think greater than your ego. Think greater than your thinking. Become greater than your emotions. Rise above the limited, tiny sense of self. Become your higher self. Become who you actually are. And so the second way to connect with your higher self and so that you can create your goals faster, is to understand that present moment awareness is going to be of the utmost importance. Just basic present moment awareness. However you get there, whatever method you have, whatever spiritual practice you do, the greatest spiritual practice, in my personal opinion, is just to take presence into every single thing that you do and everything that you're ever doing in your life. That's one of the greatest spiritual practices that you can do. Of course, a formal practice is great, but just basic present moment awareness is going to be a very powerful technique to connect to your higher self. Because what really is your higher self? Let's just define the higher self here just really quickly. Your higher self is that when you're, again, not just running on survival, but what does this mean? This means that you're not living from a space of being attached to just your thinking patterns or just your emotional reactions or your feelings or even your preferences or even your actions themselves. You understand that at the very core, essentially speaking, you are consciousness that is playing roles. You're playing roles, you're playing a character. See, the problem that we run through in life that I learned from a really good mentor that I respect is that we sign up for roles that we don't consciously agree to. So if you sign up for a role that you never consciously agree to because you lack the present moment awareness to see that that's what you were doing, that's really a lack of skill set right there. Basic present moment awareness is a basic skill set that every single human being should have so that we can begin to start to realize what is the difference between our higher self and then our ego. What is the distinction there? If you can see the distinction there, you'll start to catch when you're falling into your ego, fall into your own self-deception patterns, where you're deceiving yourself, where you're lying to yourself, where you're not holding yourself accountable, where you are not being the person that you know you can be. So basic present moment awareness is going to bring us to this awareness where, and this higher level of understanding where we can start to see where we are falling into our ego, where we are more aligned with our higher self, or quote unquote higher self for a lack of a better term. And so the third thing that I want to share with you in this video is really a powerful technique that I find is really to transcend comfort and discomfort in your life. So if you look at this graph over here, really what this is outlining in a very clear way is that there's 3 zones in that you can always be in your life. You can either be totally comfortable in your safe zone, so you're just safe and you're comfortable, nothing is really happening. You're just totally safe, right? Totally safe, nothing's really happening, and you're completely comfortable. Now, there's another zone where you're kind of uncomfortable, like you're just kind of, like you're not necessarily in a space where too much danger can happen, but you're definitely not in your safety zone anymore. So you're sort of in that discomfort zone. You're sort of like in the middle. You're sort of in a space where you are learning and you're growing and you're opportunistic towards the future, and you are moving towards the future, and you're changing and you're transforming. You might not necessarily be comfortable, but you're not really uncomfortable either. You're just sort of in the middle. And to me, that's an amazing place to be. That's where you can find your higher self. That's where you can find you being disconnected from your ego, because your ego is looking for comfort and happiness and pain. And sometimes it wants happiness and sometimes it feels pain. And it's like your higher self transcends all of that. It's about transcending pain and pleasure and finding yourself in the middle, where you just are understanding that you can be sort of all of it at once. Sometimes you feel happy, sometimes you feel sad, but the most important thing is that you're being aligned with your higher self, which is the concept that we want to integrate, that I'm inviting you to integrate in this video. So the danger zone is really a place that you don't want to be, because the danger zone, what that's doing is that's too much change. Too much change for the ego, too much transformation, too much growth, and that's going to cause a trauma. That's going to be too traumatizing, right? If you, for example, are not at a certain level of fitness to be able to go lift a certain level of weights at the gym, and you take on too much and you start lifting too much weights than you're used to, you possibly could injure yourself. And that's a great analogy. You can apply that analogy for even mental and physical tasks as well. So in any area of your life, wherever you're transforming, whether financially, whether intellectually, whether relational wise in a relationship, whether in any area where you're transforming and you're expanding your consciousness and you're doing something different that you've never done before, just keep these zones in mind and understand that when you're in the middle zone, that's where I believe you're going to find your higher self, where who you actually are, the truth of your nature, and where you're it sort of reminds me of when you learn to, if you know how to ride a bicycle, when you learn to ride a bicycle for the first time, it's sort of awkward and it's weird. It's like a little bit different, but it's fine. But it's fun to do it nonetheless, because it's different. Although it feels awkward, there's a certain excitement to do that, a certain excitement to learn and to do something different. And that is putting yourself in an environment where you have a higher probability, I believe, of connecting to your higher self. And so the fourth thing that I want to share with you in this video, the fourth way to connect to your higher self, is really to understand that rather than focusing on feeling necessarily good or necessarily bad, what I would invite and encourage you to do is to focus on just being real. Just be real, because there's going to be times where you feel happy, like I talked about earlier, and there's going to be times where you feel sad. But the most important thing, I believe, is to be authentic and to be real. And what do I mean by authentic and real? Because the truth is that if you understand that you're a conscious being, really, you can play different roles, be different ways at different times, depending on what is needed of you in that present moment. And the deeper intelligence within you will know exactly what you need to do and how you need to act and the way that you need to be moment to moment, if you trust in your intelligence enough. But the truth that I believe is that what the ego does, the opposite, you could say, so to speak, the opposite of your higher self, is it's overly attached to feeling happy or sad, pain or pleasure. But I believe that the most important thing is to disconnect from happiness or sadness and then find ourselves in the middle. The middle zone is where you're going to find the magic, the transformation, right? If you want to be a person of transformation and you want to change and you want to transform, the most important thing that you're really going to want to do there is you're going to want to find yourself in the middle zone where you're being authentic. So remember, sometimes you might feel lots of pain Other times you might just feel a lot happier. But it's not about necessarily, when for me, in my personal opinion, when it comes to becoming more aware and more conscious of this present moment, it's not about necessarily putting yourself in a particular state or feeling. It's not about how you feel necessarily. It's not about your state. It has very little to do with how you feel, really. It's about how conscious you are of what is happening within your life. And I believe that the more that we focus, rather than on focusing on what we're doing or what we're feeling necessarily or what is happening, but the place that we are coming from while we are doing what we are doing, I believe that this is the magical place where really you will find your higher self. You will find your higher self, and you will find that it will be easier for you to take action. It will be more effortless for you to take action, and things are not going to feel as heavy necessarily, because you understand that there's no need for you to take anything on that you don't really want to be taking on. So understand that when we can find that middle zone, that's what I mean by authentic. So authentic means coming from a place of integrity. When I say integrity, I mean who you actually are at the core, where then you have a higher probability of following through with your word, I believe, because that's going to be the space where you're going to hold yourself the most accountable to the truth in what's happening, rather than getting your ego involved, which is of course your higher self, and what we're pointing to here in this video. And so the fifth way to connect to your higher self, to create your goals faster, I believe, is to finally know your intention. I believe is the most important thing as well, or one of the most important things as well, is to know your intention clearly. Because although connecting to your higher self is going to be good, also what you want to do is connect to your intention and know what you want, to make that very, very clear. And again, going back even to your higher self, if you don't know what your intention is, connecting to your higher self is going to be a powerful way for you to naturally get more clarity on what it is that you want to create in your life. Connecting to your higher self, coming from the space of consciousness and awareness and presence, is going to make it so that all the goals that you need in your life will come to you in a much easier way. They will come to you with more clarity. They will come more effortlessly to you. Because what happens is that, haven't you ever noticed that the best ideas come to you when you're trying the least? But that really is an energy that you can tap into consciously if you so wish to, and understand that that is God, for a lack of a better term, really, that is divine intelligence, that is the universe, that is the creator, whatever word you want to use, is giving you these insights and all of this wisdom if you're open to receiving it, when you are coming from a space of consciousness rather than your ego. And when you come from a space of consciousness rather than your ego, I believe that's what it truly means to disconnect from your lower self and then connect to your higher self as a result, where then this is where it's going to be much easier for you to create your goals in a much more natural way, because you're not focused on overly being focused on the result and what you're getting out of a situation. You're focused more solely on the place that you were coming from while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. See, the ego just cares about what can I get out of it, me, for myself, even sometimes at the expense of its own feelings and other people's feelings and other people's. It makes it so that even if it wins or it loses, other people lose. That's how the ego thinks. The ego thinks, doesn't matter how I feel, doesn't matter how the people feel, like what can I get out of the situation, how can I win? But when we can start to understand that our higher self comes from a place where it honors itself more, how it feels, it honors the other person more, how it feels, and it's a more respectable and honorable way to live in the bigger picture, where you start to see that it's not just you playing, you're co-creating with other people as well. And you want to understand that when you align what you want with what other people want, it becomes much easier for you to create what it is that you want as well, and what you want to create in your life. But see, the lower self doesn't see like that. It's just selfish, me, what can I get out of this situation? So when we can begin to, again, align with our higher self, all of these things become much more clear, because we can start to see that what you want already exists in this present moment, and that your state of consciousness is more important than what you're getting out of a situation, which ironically enough usually helps you to get the skill sets that you need to put you in a higher probability position to get what it is that you want, to create what it is that you want, But when you're attached to the past and the limited sense of self that your ego has when it's creating stuff, it's very difficult to be open to the possibility of thinking new ideas to be able to create whatever it is that you want in your life. It becomes a lot harder to do this when you get attached to your ego. So the invitation that I have for you in this video is to begin to understand and to once again notice the difference between when you're coming from your ego and when you're coming from your higher self and who you actually are in your life, which is going to naturally lead you to what it is that you want to create